Good morning. So often we make judgment calls about people. When we see them, we make those initial judgment calls. In fact, I'm certain that many of you have already made a judgment call about me today. Some based on the way that I look, others on the way that I talk. But it's not the first time that I have been judged. In fact, there have been many times I introduce myself as Marjory Curry, and without fail, someone usually responds, "Oh, you're Marjory Curry?" I expected someone much older. And from the surface, it really sounds like a compliment because I don't look my age. But when we dig deeper into what they're saying, what they have really said to me was that they made a judgment call about me based on something that they read or heard about me. And before we come down too hard on them and make judgment calls about them, let's level the playing field and acknowledge the fact that we all do it. We all make those initial judgment calls about others. In a moment's time, we determine whether or not we would like to pursue a friendship with someone or if our time would be better spent elsewhere. Sometimes our assumptions are correct, and other times we completely miss the mark. If you can take, for an example, the prostitute on the street corner. When we see her, we make an initial assessment of her, a judgment call about her, that she's worthless, that she's not worth our time. But so quickly do we forget that she is someone's daughter, she's someone's sister, or better yet, someone's mother. And because we fail to see the world through her eyes, we gloat in our own self-righteousness. And we say, "I would never do anything like that. How dare she? How could she?" Or maybe you're one of the very few people who have compassion upon the prostitute on the street corner. What about that teenage mother who's struggling to care for her 3 children? And how instead of offering her our compassion and time, we look upon her, turn up our nose, and we mumble to ourselves, "And that's what my taxpayer dollars are going to care for her and her children?" And we say this as if there's a greater cause other than caring for the poor and the downtrodden. We say this as if our purpose of human experience is not to care for our neighbors who are in need. And it totally breaks my heart to say that this great country that we live in, that we have come to a point where we see a young African-American male sagging his pants or wearing a hoodie, and we determine that he is not worth the very air that he breathes. We determine that it's our place to put him in his place. And in our judgment calls, not only do we minimize a certain population of people, but we put others on pedestals. Consider the businessman living in Ottawa Hills, caring for his wife and children. We applaud him openly. We nominate him as Father of the Year. We congratulate him. And some of us even tell our young men to grow up to be just like him. But what we don't see are the scars that his wife hides. What we don't see are the many nights that she stay awake crying because of his violent rage. And that causes me to believe that what we don't see is even more important than what we do see. And let's consider again that prostitute that we talked about on the street corner with her high heels on, her mini skirt, her bright red lipstick. Maybe she's been up all night. This is not her first trip to the street corner. What we don't see are the 4 children that she has at home. The 4 children whose cry drove her to the street corner. The 4 children whose hunger and pain led her to sell her body, even if in selling her body, only thing she could afford was a pack of bologna and a loaf of bread. That prostitute that so many people look down upon was my mother. It was my sisters and I whose cry led her to the corner. Many nights she went to the corner, and many nights she only returned with a pack of bologna and a loaf of bread. And I'm sure many of you would not have imagined that simply by looking at me. And that proves my point, that in our human experience, we are all so much more than meets the eye. And the only way to get to that inner person, that inner being, is to dig deeper, to have conversations, to refuse to make judgment calls about people, to refuse to make those snap judgments when we interact with our classmates, when they come into class. I was a young, smelly young girl who showed up to class with the dirty clothes on. Not because I enjoyed being dirty or I loved the smell of my own musk, but because we didn't have running water in my home. We didn't have the utensils or the things necessary to wash our clothes. So I went to school wearing the best uniform that I could. I went to school combing my hair the best I knew how, but yet I was still the one that everyone in the classroom determined was worthless. And in turn, I became the bully. Yes, little Marjory, 5 foot tall, became the bully. And in doing so, I was very strategic in identifying my victims. I picked on the biggest person in the classroom to set an example out of them so that no one would attempt to touch or say anything to little Marjory. Yes, I was smelly. Yes, I was dirty, but no one attempted to say anything. Why? Because they were afraid. Because little Marjory didn't fight fair. Part of my human experience was I fought to win the fight. No matter what it took, I fought to win. And no one, again, would have imagined that simply by looking at me here today. And so I challenge you today to challenge every thought that you think. Every first initial assessment that you think about anyone. Challenge it, because you never know how they got in that situation. And when we challenge our thoughts and challenge our prejudices toward others, we can really make this human experience better. And there's only one thing that makes our human experience better, and that one thing is compassion. And the only way to get to compassion is to move beyond self, to move beyond what we see, and have heartfelt conversations and discourse with others. It is in that conversation and that discourse that we identify our own vulnerabilities. And once we become comfortable with identifying our own vulnerabilities, we are useful to others. And our story becomes more powerful because it's no longer about us and what we've experienced. A lot of times we hide behind a smile. For years, I have hidden behind a smile. I didn't tell anyone who hides behind a smile. I even had braces to make my smile better. But in hiding behind the smile, I was no use to anyone because no one understood what it took to get to this point that I am today. But once you understand the path that I have walked to get here today, you can not only celebrate my success, and it's not even about that. It's so that you will be able to see your personal experiences, your personal struggles, as an opportunity for a miracle to be performed. That you too are greater than what you have experienced. That you too are more than meets the eye. I sat in the classroom, I sat under foster parents who told me that I was worthless, that I would never amount up to anything. And they didn't tell me that based on my actions, or else in doing so they would be justified. But they said that based on my circumstances. And mind you, circumstances beyond my control. And yes, we still do that to this day. Let's think about the young lady in foster care who's running away from home. Yes, here in our great city, in our great country, she's likely to be charged as a runaway or an unruly child. But very rarely do we question, why is she running away? Is she running away because her abuser is the very same person that the system identified as her protector? Growing up in foster care, that was my experience. Many of the people that our system, our great system, identified as my protector became my abusers. Why? Because no one dug deeper. They presented well. They showed up, they smiled when the caseworker showed up. But no one asked the difficult questions. So I challenge each of you to ask the difficult questions. Don't be afraid to push the envelope. Because again, in answering those difficult questions, we reveal our true selves. It is in asking those difficult questions and having those difficult conversations that everyone shies away from that we become better in this human experience again. And we cannot avoid conversations about race, abuse. We cannot avoid those conversations. And for years, I tried to avoid those conversations. For years, I tried to hide. I feared that if anybody knew the real Marjory Curry, that they would reject me. I feared that if people knew that I had been molested, that somehow they would make it my fault. I feared that if people knew that my mother never showed up to visits, that they would assume that I was unlovable. And that fear of rejection crippled me. I became a facade. I learned how to smile when I really felt like crying. I learned how to appear strong even in my weakest moments. I learned how to say all the right things to the right people. And I became again a facade. But today I expose to you the true Marjory, the Marjory behind the smile, because I am more than meets the eye. Thank you.